Story 1, mine's kind of dumb, but I think it still counts. At work, I'm the Google Sheets expert and I make tools for different departments. Enter new guy who needed to collect, aggregate, and display a bunch of data. My boss said, send Wish a calendar invite, so you can tell her what you want, and she'll set it up for you. New guy insisted he would do it himself. A week later, he finally had a poor sheet that lacked half the information we needed, and we had to have the numbers for the state by tomorrow. So my boss asked me to fix it. New guy said that wasn't possible and that it was as good as it was going to get. 2 hours later, I sent them both a fully functional, automated sheet that does everything we need and that we can use indefinitely. That means next time and every time the state report is due, it will already be done. New guy said he would have added that if he'd had more time. Story 2. I once went to a museum with my sister and her friend, whom I had not met before. At the Greek art section, her friend said she was very into Greek myth. I thought that was cool because, unknown to her, I was doing a master's in it at the time and kept a blog of myth retellings that was fairly popular. It was a relief to have something in common with a stranger. She then became oddly haughty and said she probably knew more myths than I did. To be polite, I did not challenge her and asked her to tell me her favorite so we could have a conversation. She told me the myth of Daedalus and the Minotaur. I asked how she had heard of that one because it is fairly obscure. She said she had read it in a viral post on a mythology blog. It was my blog. Story 3. A friend of mine was at a concert in bad seats and started complaining about it on Twitter. Suddenly the band started reading tweets and called my friend up to sit on the stage for a couple of songs. They seated him at the piano, and during the next song they jokingly said, "Okay, piano solo." The crowd laughed for a second, but then my friend started jamming out, since he was a pianist in his own band. It was a dream moment. Getting to play with your favorite band. Story 4. I once challenged a girl, a friend, to a game of foosball, not knowing she grew up with a table in her house and older brothers. I even jokingly bet money on the game. I learned a bit about humility that night. The icing on the cake was when she drove me to an automated teller machine so I could withdraw the money for her. Story 5, basketball. I am a very unassuming looking guy. 5 feet 8 inches tall, 150 pounds, with no tattoos. Back in the day, I was athletic and could hang in games with fringe Division I and semi-professional players. I really did not look the part. In college, while hanging out in someone's room, it came up that I play a bit. Some guy I did not know started running his mouth about how he could destroy me and would not stop. I gave him every out until it became personally offensive. Other guys were tired of him hanging around and knew I could play, so we all went to the gym late in winter to settle things. We won the first game 11-0. I made sure not to let him score. I am usually mellow and would have let him score a couple of times once it was clear I was better. But he was a jerk, so I clamped down on him from start to finish. I blocked a lot of his shots. He stopped hanging around after that, and I became something of a hero to the others, like St. Patrick driving the snake out of the country. Being a short, skinny white guy who did not try to look like a player. Every time I stepped onto a new court, people automatically dismissed me. You get used to it. Respect, in this case, had to be entirely earned each time. After college, I moved to a new city for a job. New coworkers were looking for a fourth player for their 3-on-3 team. They were not shy about doubting me. By the end of our first practice, they were saying I should have played at the local Division I school. I was not that good, but it was flattering. By our first game, they cleared out when I had the ball. Those days are long gone. I have moved on to other interests, but I am very thankful I had those experiences. Story 6. My uncle challenged Jack Nicklaus to a golf game in college without a clue. The humiliation burns him to this day. Story 7. My aunt and uncle had a pool table downstairs, and my parents, for a variety of reasons, would go over regularly and spend the whole day there. There was nothing else for us, so my brother and I played pool all day for years. Eventually we got bored and noticed my brother had a book on trick shots, so we started trying them for fun. I never mastered them, but they were excellent practice for learning how to make the cue ball do what I wanted. For my buddy's 20th birthday, he wanted to go to a pool hall and invited a lot of people. He told me there would be a tournament, drinks for individual games, and a 50-50 prize split for the winner. He would get half because it was his birthday. He insisted I come, and I eventually caved. When we arrived, in the first game they broke and that was the only shot they took. The rest of their shots were the same. At the end I looked at him and said, "I told you not to invite me." I later found out that many of them had never played pool before. I felt bad, so I took the winnings and bought drinks for everyone. Story 8. I would never go so far as to say I'm a fencing expert, but I have been fencing casually for about 5 years and consider myself pretty good for someone who fences recreationally. A new person came to our practice and demanded that a few men do a King of the Hill matchup. I couldn't tell exactly what he intended, but his toxic behavior was obvious when everyone declined and he kept insisting. He fixated on me, so I decided to give it a try in a standard 15-point bout. I usually fence in one style at first to test my opponent, then switch to a style that counters theirs. At first he cheered as he built a 1 or 2-point lead, but by 4-2 I had already identified the flaws in his style and then scored the next 10 points without losing a single round. I beat him 15-5, and I could see him fuming. I felt great. Story 9. A guy I went on a date with tried to serenade me with his okay piano skills. He was incredibly patronizing and tried to explain which notes were which even after I told him I'm also a pianist. After his endless explanations, I asked him to move over on the bench so I could play. I'm a 2-time Carnegie Hall pianist. He never called me back afterward. Worth it. Story 10. I asked an 11-year-old if he wanted to play pool with me in a small recreation room where I was staying in Alaska. He had competed at the national level. I won the first game because he scratched on the 8-ball, even though I had only pocketed 2. Then he cleaned up the next 2 games without giving me a chance to sink more than 1. I was about 19 then. Story 11. A neighbor on my block in Brooklyn challenged me to a pizza bake-off. I recently catered pizza for my daughter's school, and word got around the neighborhood that my pizza was pretty good. My first thought was that this guy, a Brooklyn native, would make my pizza look terrible in comparison. But he bragged so much that I could not resist the challenge. He talked about how pizza was in his blood and how his father ran the pizzeria around the corner years ago. I remained silent and let my skills answer for themselves. I got a buddy to let us use one of Baker's Pride ovens at his restaurant. We even had total strangers try our pizzas, and every single person chose mine over his. I never mentioned that I have worked in pizza places almost every day for the last 30 years, that when I am not working at a pizza place I make pizzas at home at least once every 2 days, and that at 9 years old I knew I wanted to be a pizza man. Here I am, 45, getting ready to start my own pizza business. Story 12. I'm a mechanic. This happens daily. One of my favorite stories. I was fixing a buddy's truck in my garage for free. Me, your manifold absolute pressure sensor is bad. Them, pretty sure it's the spark plugs or wires. Me, no. Your spark is fine, fuel pressure is fine, the air is fine. Your fuel regulation is the issue, which is why there is fuel in your oil. Them, are you sure it's not the spark plugs? How do you actually know? I handed him a spark plug still hooked to the coil wire and pressed the remote start button. Them, what the hell, man? Me, spark is fine, isn't it? Them, how much is a manifold absolute pressure sensor? Story 13. Not me, but my brother and my best friend. We were in Baltimore for a baseball weekend in 2009, hanging out at a bar across from Camden Yards. They had a Silver Strike bowling video game. Our local bar in Boston had one too. I'm decent at the game, but my brother and friend were fucking amazing. They could bowl perfect 300 games. 2 guys were playing the game and drinking. We asked if we could play when they were done. They asked if we wanted to play them. We said sure. My brother and friend destroyed them. It wasn't even close. They said it was a fluke and wanted a rematch, this time for a round of beers. Again, annihilation. But they kept wanting to play, hoping to eventually win a game. No lie, after 13 rounds of beers, they finally gave up. They were great guys. We saw them the next day at the same bar. They walked up to us with beers in hand and said, "Rematch." To this day, we still hang out with them whenever we go to Baltimore, and they have never won. Edit for details. The 2 guys would buy 2 beers each time they lost a game to my brother and friend. The beers were Natty Boh, Baltimore's cheap, somewhat gross but awesome beer. I can't remember the exact price, but they were under $2 a piece back then. They would buy the beers and stack them on the table next to the machine, so we all just drank them. I'd say around 25 to 30 beers between the five of us over 4 or 5 hours. The tab was probably around $60 for the beers, but we were there all night getting wings and a ton of appetizers, so we all just paid the bill anyway. Story 14. My office announced a laser tag team building event 2 weeks after I played in the Ultrazone National Championships, which were an actual thing in 1997. No, this is not a How I Met Your Mother reference, which I have to specify every time I talk about it. Story 15. While working as a teacher, I defeated many students in Pokemon battles because they did not expect me to be about 15 years ahead of them in experience. They were novice players. Story 16. I dated a guy in college who was incredibly book smart, working on his master's degree with the intention of pursuing a doctor of philosophy. I was following the traditional 5-year college plan and was quite content with my level of brainpower compared to his. What he underestimated was my fondness for word games, especially Scrabble. I like to think I am quite good. In the 3 years we dated, we only played Scrabble once, and I defeated him soundly. The icing on the cake was when I scored more than 50 points by playing a single letter. He wiped all the letters off the board and threw a small hissy fit, claiming that I had cheated. I took out my Scrabble dictionary and proved that he had lost. Story 17. This is not a physical challenge. I sell building materials for a living. Think Home Depot, but for people who build skyscrapers and stadiums. There have been many occasions when an older man with no construction knowledge has tried to lecture me about my job. Story 18. People say all kinds of random things about how weather and climate work. I am a meteorologist in disguise. I work as a data scientist but have a master's degree and a doctor of philosophy in meteorology. When I politely and gently explain how things actually work, people are usually very interested to learn more. Occasionally someone will respond, "Oh yeah? How do you know?" I tell them I have published several papers on the subject and would be happy to discuss it at length. So far they have all backed down. The most common claim I hear is that yesterday's weather is a better forecast than professional weather forecasts. It is an attractively simple claim, yet very inaccurate for the mid-latitudes where I live. Regarding climate change, the most frequent assertion is that climate models do not account for clouds. They do. Clouds are a major component of climate understanding, but they are difficult to model accurately because of their complex interactions and the vast range of scales involved, from micrometers to kilometers. Story 19. When I was around 10, there was an old man with Alzheimer's in my neighborhood who would often approach my friends and me. He would ask us questions we did not know the answers to, such as what is the square root of 2, which was one of his favorites. One day I decided I would memorize the square root of 2 to 20 digits. Sure enough, he asked me the question again and I was totally prepared. He was extremely impressed, but he had forgotten who I was and kept asking the same question. Story 20. My landlord tried to blame me for damage to the kitchen cabinets, but did not know I am in construction and familiar with building codes. They placed the cabinets too close to the stove and the glue holding the laminate had melted. Story 21. Someone at a bar bet me there were only 30 days in that month and offered $20 if I could prove them wrong on the spot, before cell phones. I was born on the 31st of that month and showed them my driver's license. The person was drunk and not very bright. My driver's license was not fake. My birthday is in January, March, May, July, August, October, or December. Story 22. For reference, this is clay pigeon shooting, commonly called trap in the South. I am from a rural area and not especially southern, so when I went to other trap fields to practice in different conditions, there would always be a smartass or two who tried to place a bet. With me, this is definitely an old money sport, with some guns costing upwards of $5,000. I had an old Browning Trap Model 100 that we got in a trade for lead shot and some cash. While not cheap, it was still much lower than other people's guns, and people would take that to mean I was a newbie. They learned pretty quickly, though, since the team I was on went to the national championships almost every year from age 11 to 18. It was always funny because some competitors were good sports, but others threw an absolute fit. Saw a man damage a parazzi worth $10,000 because someone else beat him earlier. The even funnier part is that there was a man from the neighboring county who could blow us out of the water, and he always shot with a Remington Model 870 pump shotgun from Walmart. Glossary: Browning Trap Model 100. Browning Trap Model 100. Famous for its dropout trigger that can be replaced and repaired very quickly. Lead shot. The small lead balls that are in shotgun shells. We made them from Will Waits. Nationals, the national championships. I started going when the event was in Vandalia, Ohio. It later moved to Sparta, Illinois. Imagine about 2 miles of trap ranges in a row. Perazzi. A famous Italian shotgun. Very good but expensive. Remington Model 870 pump shotgun. The Remington Model 870 pump shotgun, the stereotypical pump shotgun. It is reliable. Story 23. This was not really a you-got-owned moment, but in college my friends and I would always buy the new fighting game when it came out and spend a couple hundred hours playing it, mostly messing around in online or practice mode before dropping it. During that time we held fight nights a couple of times a week, where we'd get together at someone's place and duke it out. The loser switched controllers. I did win sometimes, but I was always middle of the pack, and after 2 years no one considered me a fighting game wizard. Quite the opposite, if anything. Then, for the first time ever, the group decided to pick up a 3-dimensional fighter instead of a 2-dimensional one, Soul Calibur 3, I think. Unknown to anyone in our play group, I had grinded Soul Calibur I for 10 hours a day, every day for 3 to 4 years, practicing against 5 people who were doing the same and were just as good as I was. It honestly was not even fun. After the first half hour, they were effectively playing with 200% health while I had 50%, they were picking random characters, and I still had not passed the controller once. Thus, it was tacitly agreed that we would all play 2-dimensional fighters from then on. Story 24. I camped out for tickets to the Phantom Menace. A man in the group behind me challenged everyone to Star Wars Trivial Pursuit for money. Came to my first turn, and I ran the board, winning before anyone else had a turn. I felt bad, so I did not take his money. He still accused me of having memorized the cards to cheat. No, I had simply seen the original trilogy dozens of times throughout my life. Story 25. I am a chess master. When people hear that, they often assume I am simply very good at chess. It actually means I have played in international tournaments, defeated other masters, and received a title from a governing body. I am often challenged by friends who think they are quite good. They do not realize that a so-called pretty good player loses to an average tournament player, and an average tournament player loses to a master. Story 26. In junior high, I was challenged at floor hockey by a kid who was good at literally every sport. He was a massive jerk and would make fun of me. I was bad at most sports and not particularly fast, but I grew up playing ice hockey and spent hours on our local basketball court practicing my stick handling. I beat him. I scored a natural hat trick, and he stopped making fun of me. Story 27. It happened all the time when Guitar Hero was very popular. I was the kid who was only a few notes shy of hitting every note in through the fire and flames. People were always surprised at how well I played. I never lost to anyone in person, only to some players online. I still play Clone Hero and have improved since then, but competition is much fiercer because it is a niche community. Story 28. This kind of qualifies. Not me, but my brother. He works for a scientific instrument company as a technical expert in gas chromatography. He and his colleagues went to a trade show to demonstrate their new instrument. A couple of German scientists approached, asked a series of questions, and intermittently spoke to each other in German. Little did they know my brother is fluent in German. He let them talk among themselves until one of the Germans said in German that he bet this one was just as bad as the last one. My brother replied in German that it was not in fact bad because they had made a large number of improvements. The two Germans, stunned that they had been overheard, politely thanked my brother, apologized, and walked away. In my opinion, it was the ultimate no fuck you response. Story 29. I recently graduated as a teacher and have been working as a casual relief teacher. I play lacrosse, which is a small sport here in Australia. I tried out for the last World Cup team and made the final cut. I was team teaching with another teacher at the school. Before the period he said, "Hey mate, we are doing lacrosse today. It's a bit of an odd sport and hard to teach. So just wait over there and help with supervision and discipline." Then he walked off. Being a casual relief teacher from an agency, I did not really know how to speak up. I tried to tell him I played, but he did not give me a chance. So I listened and followed his instructions. A few minutes into the lesson, I grabbed a stick and a ball and started to work my way around the class, giving pointers and hints. The way he was teaching was incorrect, and I did not want to interrupt, so when the students broke into groups, I taught them correctly. At a drinks break, he pulled me aside and asked how I knew so much and could perform the skills so well. I told him I play lacrosse and about my playing history. He asked why I had not spoken up, and I said I had tried to tell him. I ended up running the rest of the class. Afterward, I sat down with him and went through the correct and easier way to teach the game and its skills. Story 30. Ping pong. I was hanging out with a woman I was seeing at the time, and there was a ping pong table near the bar. Two men were playing and putting on a big show about how good they thought they were, grunting, rolled up sleeves, the works. When I returned a wayward shot, I mentioned it looked fun to play. They said I could get the next game after a man who was waiting, but their rule was that anyone they added to the queue who lost had to buy drinks for everyone else. About 6 people total were playing. I played competitive ping pong in a league back in medical school and placed highly in some New York City championships. I still play every so often in my current city and have won a few tournaments here as well. I played possum at the beginning and fell behind 4-1. I won 21 to about 7 or 8. I did not have to buy a drink or give up my spot until my date was ready to go. No one even reached double digits. Story 31. I was a competitive swimmer for 14 years, including 4 years competing in the National Collegiate Athletic Association, but because I am on the shorter side, people did not assume I was any good. I was at a friend's house on a lake one summer when a macho man challenged me to race to a buoy in the middle of the lake to prove something. The lake is deceptively large, about half a mile across, so I warned him that if he was not a strong swimmer, it could be dangerous. He was tiring after about 2 minutes, so I offered to let him off the hook, but he insisted he would finish. I reached the buoy and was swimming back when I found him floundering, so I, a lifeguard, swam him back to shore. His ego took a deserved hit that day. Do not get cocky around water, even if you think you are a strong swimmer. I want to emphasize how quickly this kind of situation can become dangerous. I was a lifeguard at the time and there was another lifeguard present, but even so this was a bad idea. Do not do risky things in water. Story 32. In primary school, around 3rd or 4th grade, we had a head-to-head times tables tournament. The teacher would ask a random multiplication question to a pair of students, and the winner progressed. I was not exactly an expert at the times tables, but I was an expert at 6 times 8. For whatever reason, 6 times 8 would not stick in my head, and I had to spend extra time bringing the answer to the forefront of my mind. I was prepared for other multiplication problems, so while waiting my turn, I kept repeating in my head, 6 times 8 equals 48. When it was finally my turn to be quizzed, the teacher casually selected 6 times 8, and without a single moment's pause, I shouted, 48. The astonishment spread as I became a human computer in the eyes of my peers. Even the teacher was taken aback. I went on to win the tournament. In the minds of my would-be opponents, I had already won. It was more than victory. It was complete annihilation. Story 33. My brother had claimed that wind farms in Germany were deeply unpopular with citizens and produced barely any energy compared with the country's coal industry. I had just finished my thesis on that topic. Story 34. I was visiting Kyoto a couple of years ago. I am an American. My wife and I walked into a tiny bar with 5 people in suits laughing and talking in Japanese. We instantly knew this was not a tourist bar and felt out of place. The bartender spoke the most English, so I asked him what his favorite shochu was. Things became more comfortable as we drank and the whole bar tried to talk to us. Someone mentioned Mario Kart and I said yes, so the bartender pointed to an old Super Famicom in the corner and I apparently accepted the challenge. I smiled to myself. My wife thought it was funny because I used to have some skill at the game. The bartender selected battle mode and the man was phenomenal. I had not played in a few years and he beat me in less than a minute. The whole bar laughed and I was stunned. We moved on to the second of 3 rounds. I destroyed him 3 balloons to 0. Everyone cheered except the bartender. 2 shots were put in front of me and I threw one down. Round 3 began. We were down to 1 balloon each and I swear it was the longest battle round of all time. I was sweating, shell dodge, shell dodge. I had him in my sights and I fired. I missed. The shell bounced off the wall and I knocked myself out. The crowd went wild. That is the story of how a self-proclaimed Mario Kart expert embarrassed himself and his country in a small bar in Kyoto. We drank a lot and made many great friends that night whom we will never see again. Story 35. A man tried to hit on me by drawing a portrait of me in under a minute while I was with my boyfriend at the time, who is now my husband and my best friend. We indulged him. I asked if I could draw one in return and completely blew his out of the water. Then I introduced my boyfriend. He bowed out gracefully, we laughed, and I was very flattered. It was a creative way to hit on someone, and we ended up buying him a beer. Story 36. I am not a great swimmer, but there was a time when I could swim laps for hours, pacing myself so I had the energy to go as long as I wanted. A kid challenged me to a race, and I left him so far behind he must have thought he was about to humiliate me in front of his friends. Story 37. Not me, but some friends of mine. While in undergrad, I brought a new college friend over to an old high school friend's house to hang out. A couple other old friends were there, drinking a few beers and playing pool. My new friend was unassuming. When he first met people, he was quiet and seemed a little out of place. After he got to know people, he opened up and was a blast to be around. For some reason, my old friends decided to hustle him at pool. Super textbook shark moves. Let's play a friendly game, and if you think you're any good, we can play for money, they said. What they did not know was that my new friend had played on the circuits for a while and had won pool tournaments across Texas. He lived and breathed pool and saw them coming from a mile away. I watched it all. If they were going to treat someone I brought over that way, they deserved what they got. He roped them in like only Muhammad Ali could. He missed easy shots and made it look like he lucked in just enough to keep the game interesting and pull out a lucky win. Then they played for money. I cannot remember how much per ball, but he played 2 or 3 games, slowly seeming to get better or lucking out just enough to keep them engaged while taking a little of their money. Then the last game happened, and I have never seen someone come alive so quickly. He sank shot after shot, shots I could not make even with a year of practice. The entire time he taunted them and kept updating how much money they owed. I do not think my old friend had a chance to take a shot at all. Afterward, my old friends were furious. How could you bring this guy over here and let him hustle us like that? How could you try to hustle a new friend of mine just minutes after I introduced him to you? I asked. You earned this one, man. It ends happily. The good friend who owned the pool table and my new friend became close and are still in contact about 2 decades later. Story 38. I went with a large group of college students to a bar. A petite woman challenged me to a drinking contest with a pint of beer. She was about 95 pounds and 4 feet 11 inches, and I am 6 feet 1 inch and 200 pounds, so I laughed and agreed. I had just enough time to tip my head back to start chugging when I heard her empty glass hit the table. It turned out she could open her throat and pour the beer down. We dated for about 6 months after that. Story 39. Still waiting to say the words I've been preparing for all my life. You want to play Dr. Mario with me? You absolute fool. Story 40. I did not witness this, but there is a story about an experienced geotechnical engineer who had worked for my company. Several senior staff attended a meeting with the client and government regulators who were being difficult and refused to approve the design. The geotechnical engineer was quiet for most of the meeting. Throughout the discussion, the government official kept citing a research paper and dismissed every suggestion. Near the end of the meeting, the engineer asked the government official if he had the paper with him. The official said yes and put it on the table. The engineer asked who had authored the paper and then slid his business card across the table. It turned out to be the engineer's own paper that the official had been using to support his argument. The government official turned bright red and approved the design that same day. Story 41. A local mall had a portable climbing wall with a sign that read "Make it to the top and win $100. As I walked by, the attendant asked if I would like to try and said nobody had made it to the top. At the time, I was ranked a top 12 climber in my age group, so I laughed. After collecting my $100, I called the rest of my climbing team. One by one, they came to the mall and claimed their $100 prizes. After the fourth person, the attendant became suspicious and took the sign down. We later told him we were all nationally ranked competition climbers, and he laughed. The company that owned the rental equipment lost the money. The attendant only worked the booth and did not pay the prize money. Story 42. Haha, yeah. So there's this old Super Nintendo Entertainment System game called Tetris Attack. That's a panel to pawn port with a Super Mario World 2 theme. I played the shit out of that game when I was growing up, and I was pretty good at it. I'm actually still half decent, and I only play every few months when I visit my family. Anyhow, I was kind of seeing this guy and I had no idea how the topic came up, but he challenged me to beat him at Tetris Attack. I had sincere doubts that he had ever played before despite his posturing, and it turned out I was right. I trounced him and he actually said, "How are you so good at this stupid game?" "Practice, my dude. Years of practice." Holy shit. I can't tell you how heartwarming it is to see so much love for my favorite puzzle game of all time. I have talked to employees at retro game stores who didn't know Tetris Attack, and here is the internet proving to me that my passion is justified. I love every single one of you. Keep on shining. Story 43. My wife and I were taking an evening cruise for adults in Portsmouth Bay. The boat went around the shipyard, where my submarine and several others were docked. We were having a quiet drink when a loud know-it-all started spouting misinformation about each submarine as we passed, calling them the wrong class and wrong names. When he pointed to my submarine and said, "And that is a 637 class," my wife spoke up. "Actually, that is a 688. The man got gruff and asked, "How would you know?" My wife smiled, hugged my arm, and said sweetly, "That is my husband's submarine, the Minneapolis-St. Paul, nuclear-powered attack submarine number 708. He turned beet red while his date laughed. Story 44. A while back, a man I knew from the church where I grew up posted on Facebook about the Crusades and medieval Christianity. A woman responded with several reasons why he was wrong. He replied, "You do not know what you are talking about. You need to do your research," and linked a couple of YouTube videos by armchair historians and pastors. She replied with about a dozen academic sources and explained that she was 3 years into a Doctor of Philosophy program in medieval history. Story 45. I'm not a professional sprinter, but I'm fast enough that I have never lost a sprinting challenge. One day, a new coworker at my old job, who is now a good friend, said he could outrun me, so I accepted a 60-meter race. I let him start half a second before me and then passed him about 10 meters before the finish. He was so surprised he tripped and fell on the pavement. We laughed about it despite his minor injuries. Story 46. It was my first weapons qualification with a National Guard unit I had just transferred to. A lot of National Guard soldiers only shoot a rifle once a year for qualification. A soldier in the platoon I had taken over joked that lieutenants are bad at basic soldier tasks, trying to get me worked up. He bet I could not shoot better than him. We were not supposed to bet, so I declined any wager, but I accepted the challenge. I hit 40 out of 40, as I always do. He hit the minimum 23 out of 40. He had basically bet I would not qualify. I have worked in the firearms industry my whole civilian career, focusing on rifle and long-range shooting as my main hobby, and I have shot competitively. His excuses were hilarious. His sight was not working, he could not get a good position, and so on. I assigned him a few details for being a poor sport. To those saying this was poor leadership and asking why enlisted personnel resent officers, lighten up. The details were kitchen duty. They were already in the rotation, and he drove people to the post exchange because he was one of the few people licensed on a light-medium tactical vehicle. This started a competition that lasted through deployment, where soldiers bet their details, and I ended up doing some of them. More often than other soldiers because my people constantly challenged me, and in reality their punishment or detail was one they were scheduled for anyway if they lost against me. Story 47. I am really good at archery. My friend and I rented a bow at the local range, and he wanted to bet me a beer for each round. I told him no. He might get lucky in a single arrow shoot-off, but he wanted to do proper 3-arrow rounds. He insisted, so I drank for free all night. Story 48. A Japanese client who studied in France hired me for a translation, but wanted to change all my sentences to prove she was better than me in my native language. She produced a grammatically correct version that sounded so sexual that, if you searched the terms on the internet, you would find only pornography and erotic novels. I had to tell my boss that she was forcing me to write pornography because the text was for a mascara brand intended for sale in France, so he could stop her. After that, she stopped trying to outdo me. Story 49, he was shotgunning beers. After losing the first round, he asked for a second try. He lost the second round and then fell down. Story 50. I am a 38-year-old female government auditor. One of the programs I oversee is a boarding school for teenagers with a history of delinquency. The program emphasizes athletics. I have gained about 30 pounds of body fat since taking this mostly sedentary job and slipping into poor nutritional habits. I am muscular underneath and stronger than average. Before this job, I worked on the side as a personal trainer and posing coach. One day at the program, I needed to interview a student who did not want to leave his weightlifting class. He told me he would talk to me if I could deadlift the bar he was using, which weighed about 90 kilograms. The staff were visibly annoyed that the student was giving the state a hard time, but I was wearing stretchy pants, so I set up and pulled the lift. The interview followed, and it is now an ongoing joke at the program that when I request interviews, they ask if I need chalk or anything for the required deadlift. Story 51. My college has a dedicated gaming room in its central building. There are televisions for people to plug devices into and use. I went in one day and saw someone playing Guitar Hero. He was playing on expert, so he was good but not perfect. I sat down, chatted with him, and eventually he challenged me to a pro face-off on Through the Fire and Flames, where the goal is to score more points than your opponent. I am not perfect at Through the Fire and Flames, but I figured what the heck, it would be fun. Well, our opponent got a little too big for his boots because he could not hit the intro. The higher your combo in Guitar Hero, the more your score is multiplied, up to 4 times. If you do not hit the intro in Through the Fire and Flames and cannot keep your 4 times multiplier through the fast strumming at the beginning, you are immediately behind by about 30,000 to 60,000 points. The solos did not go much better for him. He blamed his gear. Story 52. My nephew challenged me to Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. Story 53. We were at a work golf outing when he challenged me. I have played golf my whole life, including in high school and at public courses every year since, which he did not know. On the first hole, I hit a 200-yard drive down the middle. He called it luck, but the same thing happened on every hole. He drank a lot after the first couple of holes, and to this day he refuses to admit I won because we did not keep a scorecard. Story 54. My 3-year-old niece challenged me to see who could color inside the lines better. I casually glanced at my fingernails. I think I taught her a thing or two. Story 55. Coworker said, I am pretty good at running. I run every day. I could probably beat you in a marathon. They did not know I used to be a professional runner. I ran under 14 minutes for the 5-kilometer, under 29 minutes for the 10-kilometer, and under 15 hours for a 100-mile trail race. I even won a national title. So I agreed to run with them and entered the local marathon with no training. I won the prize money, earned a few $100s, and bought beers for everyone. It made for an interesting Monday at work. Story 56. My dad was into video games before they were really a thing. He had a Magnavox Odyssey and Intellivision and other consoles. In the 1980s, you could rent Nintendo consoles and games from video stores. He would do that when he visited, and I would almost always beat him at whatever game. I didn't see him that much, but once he visited, he decided to rent a console and the game Double Dribble, an early Nintendo Entertainment System basketball game. It was pretty new at the time, and he knew I didn't really like basketball. He played it all day while I was in school. When I got home, he challenged me to a game. The look on his face when his 10-year-old son beat him by about 20 points was priceless. My friends and I rented almost every new game, and I had played that one a lot. Sports or not, it was still a video game, and I was good at games. Now my teenagers can regularly beat me at just about anything. Story 57. Guitar Hero. He did not know what he was getting into. He suggested we play and made joking comments about how he could totally beat me. We played on expert and I absolutely demolished him. He was even struggling to hit the orange notes, which made me shake my head. Story 58. I had a mate who played Call of Duty with me. I would usually beat him in a one-on-one match, though he sometimes won or came close. Then we played a different game, Motorstorm Apocalypse. I was a legitimate top 10 player in that game with multiple #1 time attack records. He had just started the offline mode and was winning races, so he thought he was good. I warned him, but he insisted on a one-on-one to show off his skills. 2 minutes later, I had lapped him in a 3-lap race. He quit before the finish, embarrassed, because a 1-minute timer at the end of the race prevents anyone who has not completed the race from being classified as finished. He never played that game again. Story 59. Something similar happened to me. I told a coworker that I could play guitar. He did not believe me and challenged me to learn and play minor swing in 2 weeks. I nailed it within the time frame and performed it at work. I had only agreed to play for him because I am a bit shy and do not like performing, but there were no meeting rooms available, so I had to play in front of the whole office. It was not my idea of fun, but it went well, and he and the others now believe I can play a little. Story 60. Basketball. I am actually pretty tall, and I have played my whole life. In my 20s, I was a pretty goofy stoner. I would show up to competitive open gyms all over my city, and with my long hair and tall, skinny body, I usually got picked last or near last. I can dribble, dunk, and shoot three-pointers, and I am 6 feet 5 inches tall. I was always asked to come back and was never picked last when I returned. Story 61. A guy who was flirting with me bet that he could draw a better rose than I could in 30 seconds or less. He proceeded to draw a decent rose. I followed with my version, which was anatomically correct and included shading and thorns. It was miles better and painfully obvious. I had only a few commissions at that point, but I had always been an artist. He laughed and found his defeat amusing. We are married now. Story 62. I studied memorization techniques and mnemonics. I decided to have a bit of fun with my teacher. He was the kind of person who would quickly call you out for not paying attention in class. I sat there memorizing the list in my head, fully aware he would notice I was not writing anything down. As expected, he chewed me out for not taking notes. I said I had it all in my head, knowing he would call on me the next day to recite the list. The next day, in the middle of his lecture, he turned to me with a smug smile and asked me what the items had been the day before, calling me Roller Derby 88. I immediately listed them in order without hesitation and then listed them backwards. His smile grew wider and the rest of the class cracked up. Story 63. I am an astronomer. If we met on the street, you probably would not guess I was a scientist. I am a woman who enjoys dresses when the weather is nice. This was doubly true when I was in my 20s and single, especially at bars. At the end of college, I did a summer internship in Mountain View, California. If you went out, there were many Google employees who sometimes wore shirts with the company name, which made them easy to spot and often obnoxious. I got stuck chatting with one. When he asked my major, he sneered with a "Do you really know the subject?" attitude and asked if I knew the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. After my answers, he said, "It's probably not so hard because they go easy on women. They don't want to scare them off." He then told me about a lecture he had attended in Mountain View by Jill Tarter, who runs the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence Institute. He also talked about the Allen Telescope Array they were building in Northern California, as if I might not know about it. I gave him a minute, then told him I was actually working for Jill that summer at the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence Institute on interference mitigation for the Allen Telescope Array. I asked if he wanted to hear what she was really like or see some pictures from the Allen Telescope Array site. I had also just met Frank Drake, who was very nice. He was not happy, but at least he stopped talking to me after that. Story 64. I am a female mechanical engineer and I often encounter people at Lowe's, car shops, car dealerships, and so on who talk down to me or assume I do not understand basic concepts. For example, a man at Lowe's insisted that bolt threading and pipe threading are the same. Another person claimed there were no diamond-tipped hole saws and tried to sell me a Dremel for the job. I later found a hole saw in the tile section. Mechanics have told me my car's air filter needed replacing when I had changed it weeks earlier. My filter is circular, not square like the one they brought out. Car salesmen are the worst. They often ignore my opinion, especially when my husband is present. I usually make the car buying decisions, although my husband knows a lot about cars, so they try to sell to him. I generally let them talk and then clarify with my husband later. I am not trying to embarrass anyone. Story 65. A Tinder date bet me dinner that I could not beat her in Super Smash Bros. I have been playing competitively for about 6 years, so she paid. Story 66. I would not call myself an expert, but once a friend challenged me to a game of Star Wars Trivial Pursuit. He rolled to go first and missed the initial question. That was his only turn. Story 67. When my parents were still dating, my mother was the captain of her competitive college swim team. A man at a party was strutting around, bragging that he was an elite athlete and betting that no one could beat him in a swim race. My mother's stroke was the butterfly. She easily beat him, and he was left with his tail between his legs. Story 68. My friend dismissed my advice to another friend about the game Overwatch because I do not play ranked matches at all. I completed my placement matches that day, placed 3 full leagues above him, and have risen further since then. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.